You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the House of Sunny podcast, again on video, and I'm here with a special guest, Walter Hudson. We're going to talk today about Nick Cannon, and we're going to talk today about what's going on in small town, medium town America with the city councils and the school boards. There's some nefarious stuff going on, and Walter can talk about both those subjects because he's Black. I can't talk about it, but you can talk about it, and you're on a city council.
That's true.
I have the perfect guest.
I'm always happy to be perfect.
You're super relevant to my show today. Of course, I don't shy away from talking about racism or, race and Black issues because I don't know.
What I love about what you're doing on social media right now is you've got an unapologetic crusade on behalf of white people. That is deeply necessary and it would be satirical in any other time, but it's like, no, guys, I'm serious. We need to save the white people right now because we're all under attack.
What is happening? Like, I mean, I was just talking to a friend, or he wrote something on Facebook. Like, we were raised in this generation that was indoctrinated with this color blindness,
right?
And then all of a sudden, we're supposed to be racist, and it's like, no, that's it. Wait a second, what is wrong with you people? And so we're standing here like kind of dumbfounded while this young generation tells us you have to be racist and you have to shut up and give space, and that white people are the worst. And I mean, I was taught that we were all supposed to get along, but in addition to that, and because I see this in some of my own generation, they don't know what to think. They're thinking to themselves, am I missing something? Because I've never really thought about this. And there's this huge movement. And I am like, no, stop. Like, don't fall for it. Because I grew up in the inner city. So I don't have that same, like, am I missing something? I grew up around Black people. I've hung out with them. We were all the same. We were integrated. And they weren't racist and I wasn't racist. And then it was like it changed. And I saw it change with this critical race theory toward the end of high school and in college. And I think it was alarming to me and I was upset about it. But now it's evolved into really overt, pure white hatred.
Yeah.
And it's allowed. Culturally, it's acceptable. And that to me is frightening.
Not only is it acceptable, it's demanded. Like,
yes,
you are
right.
required to participate.
Silence is violence.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. You're right to draw the distinction between the color blindness with which you and I grew up, because I was born in Detroit and spent my first 12 years there, then moved to Minnesota. I am both a product of and a partner in interracial marriage. I've been around multiple ethnicities, religious backgrounds, people of all stripes for as long as I've been alive. And for the first 20 years of my life, I'm not going to pretend as though race wasn't a topic or that people weren't mindful of it or that it didn't play some role in our interactions and that some of those interactions weren't necessarily positive. But it was nothing like what we're dealing with today.
Right.
If you were born on my 20th year and now you're 21 years old, your experience of race is 180 degrees the opposite of what my experience with race.
I had the same experience. I feel like people were kind of close to the ideal and it's fallen off a cliff.
Yes.
And I remember I moved to the South, Florida for my first year in college. And that was the first time that I heard the N-word uttered by a white person. And at that time, even Black people barely said it. But never a white person in the North, in Minnesota or the inner city. I mean, but even Black people were like, oh, you really, we shouldn't even be saying that. And this was this was like, I grew up with rap before the Eazy-E kind of crap.
Right.
So it wasn't thug culture yet, totally. That happened when I was in high school, in later high school. So yeah, it's like, young people, if you're listening, it is so much worse today. And you know, that's what we're all watching and reacting to and going, what the? And this is not progress. This is not progress.
This is the opposite.
Yes.
This is regressive. It's regressive, and it's intentionally regressive. This is not an accident. This is by design. You don't take people from a position of peace and harmony and color blindness in their thinking. They don't naturally drift towards being prejudicial and bigoted and judging everybody according to the color of their skin. You know, when you or I were in school, they were still teaching Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
That's right.
On its merits. They were still talking about the merits of judging people according to the content of their character, as opposed to the color of their skin. And it was framed as a morally virtuous idea that's right. Something that ought to be propagated. Today, that's downplayed. And the opposite.
Not only that, but if you say that, especially as a white person, but even as a Black person now, if you say color blindness is the ideal,
right,
that's racist.
That's right. Well, because they've inverted the definitions of everything to where now, quite literally, it sounds absurd, kind of like when I was talking about how you're online talking about we need to save the white people. It sounds absurd in any other context.
It's so absurd.
But when you take into account what's actually happening, the actual context, you realize, no, this is true. They have taken the meaning of words and completely inverted them. Non-racism, colorblindness, is racism now. Actual racism, telling people that they're bad because of the color of their skin, which is what all this woke stuff is, that is now racism or anti-racism.
Right.
So it's like the Antifa. Everything is the opposite of what it actually is now. And so you have to look through everything through this mirror lens in order to get a view of what people are actually advocating for and what's actually being said and done around you.
Yeah, it's really, I'm really alarmed as a white person. I don't want to be herded into my race, first of all. I don't want to, and I don't think I will have to be, because there's plenty of people, normal people of all skin colors and
right.
origins who are like, this is not right. But I do feel like white people need to start standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to go to your diversity training and be told that right. I'm no good because of my skin color. White people have to start saying that out loud. And as many of us who can give moral support to that, the better. All colors. We need Black people to tell us that it's okay for us to do that. And we need white people to model and do that. And I want to be one of those white people, because I don't have white guilt. I do not accept that. I don't believe in white privilege. And I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody was doing the same thing. And nobody, I feel like, and I've said this as a joke, but I think it's true. If there's a white privilege, this is my joke, it's that nobody told me growing up that I couldn't rise because of my skin color, and that there was this like dark cloud over my existence because of my skin color.
Right. You had the privilege of self-respect and a sense of dignity.
That is the saddest thing. Yeah, and it's really a shame. I actually think it's so destructive, not just the racism, but like destructive to all of these young people, young Black people and brown people who they're being raised and indoctrinated to see racism in every obstacle in life.
Yeah.
And life is hard and life is full of obstacles, and people can be jerks and get in your way, and they can be competitive with you and icky. And it's not always about it's probably more often not about your skin color.
Right.
I'm a woman. Have I experienced sexism? Maybe. Like, I don't know. I grew up in a very, very mixed neighborhood. Did I experience racism from Black people? Maybe. But to be honest, I didn't even think about it. Like when I was bullied, I thought that girl's an asshole. Like I didn't say it's because of my skin color. I never ever thought that. But all of these people are being raised to think it's because of white people, you know?
There's a large degree, and I don't think this point has been made enough or discussed enough. There's such a large degree of navel gazing involved in all of this race talk, where even if the answer to your question about your own experience is true, even if you've experienced racism, so what?
Right.
Who cares?
Don't let it stop you. Who gives a crap if somebody's, right. That's such a good point, Walter. Or sexism or any of these types of things, or even somebody just being mean and evil. Do not let it stop you.
Right. Why do we have to stop the presses and have a conference about it?
We need to have a national conversation about that.
Yeah, we need to have a national conversation about somebody being mean to you. Are you kidding me? Get over yourself.
Right.
You want to talk about privilege? There it is.
Right. Who has time to have a national conversation over somebody being mean? Ask people in the third world if they have that time.
You know what's the privilege of? It's the same privilege of somebody wandering through the woods who stumbles upon a campfire. It's the privilege of benefiting from the warmth of something you didn't create. That's what we're dealing with. We have an entire generation of people who are benefiting from the freedom and liberty and prosperity that was made possible by previous generations, and then pissing all over their memory and tearing their statues down and castigating their moral character for having the audacity to have created the very thing that they're benefiting from now. That's the real privilege that we're dealing with in this society. A privilege that enables you to flail about on the ground like a baby crying because you experienced racism.
Just like you said, because somebody was mean to you, because you don't even know if it's racism. I mean, you just don't know what people are really thinking ever. Unless even if they come out and say it, like these hate crimes and stuff, even if somebody is beating you up and calls you the N-word, probably they're just trying to be mean. They don't, you know what I'm saying? They probably have they're probably married to a Black person and they're like, just trying to be mean to you. Yeah. Because did you see that clip of the Black guy that was beating up the white guy in the store and called him the N-word? It's just become a term of dislike and meanness. And
you've hit on something that can't be overemphasized, which is the fact that, and this is actually true for the left, and unfortunately increasingly the mainstream culture, racism is the worst thing in the world. It's so bad. It is the primary concern above and beyond personal safety, law and order, right and wrong, and indeed, your own physical well-being. Because you're right, you could take a look at two cases where a perpetrator did the exact same thing to a victim, and if in one of the cases both people are white and in the other cases the victim's Black and the perpetrator is white, this is a huge problem, and the other one you're never even going to hear about. So what that tells you is that they don't actually care about the real violence. We just saw it in the streets with the looting and the burning of cities to the ground. They don't actually care about people's individual rights.
Right.
People being hurt. Right.
Yeah.
People having bad experiences and bad things happen. So they don't care about that at all. What they care about is this navel gaze. It's the idea. It's their idol. It's their religious idol.
It is religious. It's It is.
That
is proof that it's fanaticism rather than, real concern for humanity.
Yes. There's another point I wanted to make before we got too far away from what you said earlier, because you were talking about the importance of white people standing up to defend themselves. That's another point that really needs to be made clear and repeatedly. And I had a thought about that, because as a Black man, as a person of color,
I won't use that term. I can't stand it. I'm really resisting that. But I know you were doing your air quotes because it's so ugh. Yeah.
But as a person of color,
you are a lovely person of color.
Thank you. Who also happens to be conservative, or at least, right of Marx. I'm used to being called an Uncle Tom, right?
Yeah.
Now, when people hurl that insult, it has no impact. It has no effect. I could care less. It's boring. It's lazy. You've put no thought into it. It's NPC to the extreme. You're just reading off a script. However, it does get me to thinking, right? Like, what is it that you're really accusing me of when you call me an Uncle Tom? At root, the accusation is that you're participating in your own subjugation by legitimizing or taking up the problematic ideas and views that are actually formulated to harm you and harm your people, right? Well, if we take that concept at face value, who are the real Uncle Toms among us? I'd say it's all the white people who are actively taking up their own cross to bear of white guilt, like you talked about earlier. It's the white institutions, the white people in institutions and positions of power and influence who are saying there's something wrong with us because we're white and we should hate ourselves.
Walter, I have had the same thought. I had that thought last week driving in my car, and I think it was triggered because that new movie's out, Uncle Tom, which I haven't seen yet. I don't know if you've seen it, but and I thought we need a new name for this, and it should be Aunt Karen. What do you think? We got to come up with a term for this. Auntie Karens, all these Auntie Karens out there blocking traffic for BLM, getting run over for BLM. Oh, that white girl died, Yeah.
Anyway. Well, we've with all this identity, and the term identity politics has kind of lost its relevance because it gets used so much, but the core of what that is, the root of it, is creating a religious idol out of your professed identity. And that has become such a powerful social motivator for people that we now live in a world where if you're a white teenager growing up right now, you're desperate because all teenagers are desperate to define themselves and to have to carve out some sort of distinction that makes them special and that they can be proud of. And if you're trying to do that as a normal teenager in a context where you're being told that any sort of identity as a white man, a white boy, a white male, or even a white female is inherently negative and bad and boring, and you're Becky and you're basic, and all these terms that they throw around to describe that there's nothing special about you unless you can claim some other status. That's how you get to Elizabeth Warren pretending she's a Native American.
Yeah, Rachel Dolezal and me in blackface. It's a problem.
Well, and even you're ready to get banned from social media. Even a lot of the LGBT stuff. I think a lot of the LGBT stuff, obviously these identities are real, but I think there are a lot of people, more than we'd like to admit, who, as young people, gravitate towards those identities because of the status that it provides.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to be at the bottom status-wise, and especially young people who are very concerned about where they fit in and socially. They're still trying to figure that out, whereas you and me are like, whatever. We've had kids. At that point, you're mom and dad. Like, there's no other. That's how I feel. I have advanced to just mom post-child. But anyway, no, I agree. I mean, I grew up, the other thing too I want to say is being in the majority, if white people are still in the majority, which they barely are, isn't going to help us. No. There's plenty of examples in history where a majority was it doesn't take that much of a percentage of fanatics who are racist to crush a group of people, even if they're in the majority, especially if there's all these Auntie Karens as part of that, helping the process along. And because they think, well, they won't cut my head off. They'll, because we've seen societies where Christian societies, for example, were crushed by a small minority Muslim population, or I'm sure there's even a racial example, which I don't really know because I grew up in the inner city and that's my education. But no, I mean, there have been examples in history where there's an overlord oligarchy that is running things. And even though there's a lot of people, let's just take Russia, for example. You might have had all these farmers, but you still had this kind of authoritarian oligarchy under communism that caused millions of them to starve to death. Or you have the caste system in India, where you have the untouchables, which are this vast group of people kept down by the minority elites. So it's not going to save us. We're sitting around going, well, but we have the numbers. So it's not concerning that people are talking about, overtly talking about how the color of your skin makes you bad, makes you morally bad. Right. And so anyways, and on that note, maybe let's play the Nick Cannon thing, because so what happened was Nick Cannon, who is a prominent Black person in Hollywood, who has done mainstream and still does mainstream shows. This guy has a podcast and hilariously trying to do Malcolm X-y looking stuff. So let me share that really quick here. By the way, I had a really hard time getting a copy of this video.
Oh yeah.
I have to share it again and make sure share computer sound. The video has been pulled. I found a clip. There's a slight echo of my voice now ever since your phone rang. I don't know why.
Oh.
I don't know if there's anything. Okay, so here's the clip. It's not the full clip. I will explain what he said after this, but this clip alone is bad enough.
Melanin comes with compassion. Melanin comes with soul, that we call it soul. We soul brothers and sisters. That's the melanin that connects us. Right. So the people that don't have it are a little, and I'm gonna say this carefully, are a little less. And where the term actually comes from, because I'm bringing it all the way back around to Minister Farrakhan, to where they may not have the compassion or the when they were sent to the mountains of Caucasus, when they didn't have the power of the sun, that the sun then started to deteriorate them. So then they're acting out of fear. They're acting out of low self-esteem. They're acting out of a deficiency. So therefore, the only way that they can act is evil. The only way they have to rob, steal, rape, kill, and
fight or flight,
in order to survive.
Exactly.
So I just want to stop that and just say just highlight what he's saying here. The melanin in the skin, literally the physiology of the skin, has made Black people more compassionate, and that white people more savage. And he says a little bit more about this. And this is obviously right out of like Farrakhan, I guess.
And these people who didn't have what we had, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people.
Right.
They had to be savages. They had to be barbaric. Because they're in these Nordic mountains. They're in these rough torrential environments. So they're acting as animals.
Right.
So they're the ones that are actually closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages.
Okay. And then he goes on to say, I just want to say exactly what he said after that, because I can't find that on video, but he said, right after that, he explained what he meant by white people. And let me just get the exact quote here. They had to be savages, adding that he was referring to Jewish people, white people, Europeans. That's kind of what he said. So he sort of, as an aside, threw this like Jew thing out there, which is now the only thing that he has come out and apologized for. Is that, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be anti-Semitic.
it's also the only thing being reported in much of the reporting about this.
That's
that he
right.
said something anti-Semitic. I read an article today, I think it was from CNN, that talked all about his supposed anti-Semitic comments, didn't mention anything about his anti-white comments.
Right.
None of the
because
context.
that's just acceptable. It's not okay to be white. And
Right.
they're also hiding it. They're hiding what's really happening because YouTube has taken down all the videos.
Right.
That's the only one I could find, and it's brand new. Like it just came up in the last hour. I'm sure it'll be pulled.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find the full quote. I mean, I'm sure this stuff is going to pop up. Once it's on the internet, you cannot get rid of it. So good luck, Nick Cannon. But the establishment, and I mean, I would argue it's the Democrats and their minions in the media and in the social media. And the word has gone down that this needs to disappear.
And let's just pause to consider. Now, I don't believe in the whole concept of systemic racism as it's been put forward. I think it's a canard and an obfuscation meant to prevent clarity and understanding. But let's just pause to consider if there is a systemic racism in our society and in our culture, doesn't it make a lot more sense that it would manifest in something like this, where somebody goes on their podcast and says something that's explicitly, by definition, racist against an entire group of human beings, and then you can't find the video in mainstream sources? All of the mainstream reporting omits all of that context.
Yeah, omits the moral crime.
Yeah, and we're basically
covering for this guy. Yeah.
I mean,
and
to me,
then,
that's the indication of systemic racism.
Yeah, and so I guess he Viacom distanced themselves from him, which is where his podcast was or something like that. I don't really know what his career is. But Fox came out in support of him. He is on a Fox show. He's like the host of this show, and they said, yeah, he's still going to be the host. We're having more conversations with him. He's listening and learning, and and I'm not a cancel culture person, and fine if people want to take their time before firing his ass and make sure that he doesn't want to come out and say something a little stronger about, but the level of evil that guy just uttered, I've rarely heard that, and I'm sure in some circles you get that. Like if you're hanging out with a Farrakhan crew, maybe you're hearing that more often. But a prominent person saying that level of pure skin color hatred and like not even hatred, but oh yeah, as a matter of fact, you're just more savage and you're less compassionate. You're more prone to rape and steal, which is freaking wrong, and like statistically, it's actually the other way around. And I'm not saying it's skin color that causes that disparity. It's cultural, but he's saying it's skin color, which is real racism. That's like, it couldn't be more textbook and creepy. And that guy still has a job on Fox today. I mean, okay, let's take our time. Let's investigate. I don't like the overnight people get canceled kind of thing. But Fox hasn't even come out and said, boy, we really don't like what he said. We're going to talk to this guy and see what he has to say about it. We're not going to cancel him because we don't do that or whatever. That's fine with me. But, to only come out and say, I'm sorry that I said anti-Semitic thing. I met with a rabbi and he said, and I've been convinced, that's like his quote this morning is like, thanks to the rabbis who corrected me. And, as long as you've been another oppressed race or group, he's sorry. But if you're white, he's not sorry.
Right. Well, and again, that goes back to the whole, Uncle Tom collaborator meme. If let's say he has been meeting with rabbis, why aren't those rabbis talking to him about his anti-white racism? Why isn't there broad moral condemnation of the overt race? Like this guy is talking in terms, talk about the power of the sun. This is mysticism, okay? Power of the sun.
The Mount Caucasity? What was that? No, Mount Caucasian?
Yeah, I think Mount Olympus is what we're looking for here. They were sent to the mountains. They have deficiency because of their melatonin. These are the types of things that white racists have been saying about black people since the beginning. It's the time, I forget the exact scientific term, but there's I think it starts with a P and has an F sound, like phrenology or something along those lines. It's that deal where the Nazis would measure people's skulls and look at like the size of their noses and their distance of their eyes, the spacing of their eyes and things, and try to use that as some sort of scientific indicator of intelligence or capacity. That's what this is. This guy is engaged in literal Nazi style.
Literal Nazi crap. Yeah.
Right. And so why isn't that the conversation? And why would you want to be, I mean, you know, you say you're against cancel culture, and in its current iteration, I'm right there with you.
Right. I think because of its current iteration, I'm averse to this mob pile on and get the guy fired. But I'm very disturbed by this overt white hate.
Why would you want to be associated with it?
Yeah.
If you're Viacom, if you're Fox News, you know, if you're any company, why do you want to be associated with somebody and have somebody speaking on your platform who's spewing something so blatant? Like, there's no nuance here. This is just pure,
There's
raw,
no other way to take it.
Mainline evil is what's being articulated. And to my mind, somebody who's saying that sincerely, non-satirically, non-ironically, they don't have anything else to say that I want to hear or be associated with. Like, they've demonstrated a fundamental flaw in their character and lack in reasoning that makes their opinion on anything completely irrelevant and unvaluable to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I would disassociate from him. There have been a lot of black people who have come to his defense, including Diddy, including Charlemagne the God. So other prominent black voices have come out in support of him and said, hey, if you get fired, you come over here, you work with us. So
fine.
People are okay with this, you guys. I mean, this is creepy. This is wrong.
We should take note of who those people are. We should be noting who those people are.
I'm going to keep my little blacklist.
That's a racist term.
Did I just say that?
Yeah.
My out of favor list. Okay. Right. So what do you think can be done? I think people just have to start saying, no.
So that's kind of where I was going with the cancel culture thing is, yes, I agree. Cancel culture in its current iteration does need to be opposed. However, I think what we oppose it with is an inverted cancel culture. Like, the methodology of cancel culture is not necessarily unto itself wrong. Now, you know, your point about the mob rule and rushing to judgment, that part's wrong, yes. But the underlying idea that we ought to have a moral and rational analysis of the things that people say and the values that they advocate for, and then make our association decisions based upon our perception of their character and their virtue, that's 100% legitimate.
Yeah.
And what's happened over the course, like, you know, we both talked about how we grew up. What I've seen happen over the course of my lifetime and yours is we've gone from a space where conservatives were largely the ones who were engaged in social censure and what we would today call cancel culture.
Right.
Conservatives were doing that on the basis of certain what they regarded to be moral virtues and moral ideas, and over time got convinced not to do that. And it was with the libertarian notion of live and let live, of, you know, yeah, you might not agree with what somebody's saying or doing, but you really shouldn't say anything about their life because it's theirs to live. And there's truth to that, but the concept was weaponized and it was metastasized.
Because isn't that the American way, kind of? You know, yeah.
That's tolerance. That's real tolerance. But it got weaponized.
And individualism, that we're not going to tell other people what to think or what to say. But, you know, and even socially, that's, you know, it's difficult. I think, where's the line where you come out and you go, no, wait, now we need to shame this person. We need to put the scarlet letter on them and push them out of society. You know,
Nick Cannon is the line. Nick Cannon is the line.
Right.
Okay. And this is the point that I'm getting to, is there is a line, And if we can first acknowledge that that line exists, our second step is to define what that line is. And then our third step is to engage in relentless cancel culturing of people who cross that line. Like, we need to invert this whole process, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And what's happening right now is the people who are in positions of highest influence are the ones who are speaking in the loudest volume with the greatest amount of moral conviction. Right. It's all about moral conviction. And the people who are standing on the soapbox with their holy book in their hand, pounding it on the pulpit and saying, this is wrong and we are right. They're the ones who are getting traction in the culture. And so we need to be those people. We need to kick, it's a game of cultural king of the hill. We need to kick them off the soapbox and we need to take it over.
And this is the problem though with this is why the racism charge is so good. It works so well for them. Is I think we all acknowledge that it's wrong, or we've been, like, even you and I, we were raised on this colorblindness. So racism is wrong. So the fear of being called a racist or even being one or being thought of as one is keeping white people and black people black people being called an Uncle Tom or whatever, from standing up for white people. So they've really captured this moral high ground. And the only thing that that will save us, I think, is if we have to grow comfortable with the charge of racism.
Yes.
Because I mean, it's meaningless at this point. It's actually the opposite. So when somebody calls you a racist, usually it's because you're not one.
And usually it's because they are.
Right.
I mean, that's where we're at. We're at the point where all they're doing is projecting. They're calling you what they are and accusing you of what they're doing. It's the ultimate manifestation of gaslighting. And so you're absolutely right. The first step is for people who know they're in the right to stop valuing the moral condemnation of people who they know are wrong. Yeah. Why do you care?
Yeah, it's like somebody. It's like, what's the Nazi saying about me today?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, no, don't care and condemn them and stand firmly with your fists planted on your hip in utter defiance and condemnation. Look down upon them with down your nose and scoff and laugh in their face. They're worthless.
There was this video that Tucker played of this like older white New York lady, and some white Antifa kid gets in her face and calls her a racist, and she goes, "Is that all you got?"
That's right. That's right.
Oh, she says, "Go back to your mother's basement."
And it is all
all they've got.
And so, and they're only the only reason it works, the only ammunition they have is your sanction of their accusation. Yeah. You give it weight by lowering your gaze and, taking a submissive posture and considering whether or not it's actually true and doubting yourself. We need to stop all of that. We need to stop. And I believe you've been making this point on social media as well. You got to stop with the qualifications. Yeah. You got to stop with just so you guys know before I make my point. Yeah, right.
No, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm going to now criticize the left.
Yeah, right. No.
You have to say
cut
that?
all that out. Cut all that out.
Cut it all out.
The
it's
people
weakness.
Who you're making, yes. The people who you are making those qualifications for, the people you're trying to impress, are not going to be impressed. When you're speaking out at this point, we're past the point. We've crossed the threshold in the Trump era, past which we're trying to win hearts and minds and convince each other and persuade. This is no longer about persuasion. This is about political will. It's about power, and it's about self-defense. And you don't do those things gently, and you don't ask for permission. You just do it. You take the ground because it's yours, and you kick off the invaders with extreme prejudice.
I love this. You take the ground because it's yours, and stop giving them ground. Like with the statues. Oh, well, if it's a Confederate statue, I'm okay with the mob tearing it down. Or I'm willing to admit that our artifacts and our historical art. I mean, maybe if the world were sane, we could talk about Confederate statues, but the world is not sane. Like, we're not in that kind of battle. We are in a situation where you do not give the left an inch because they are going to put you in a camp next.
And you're not. And again, we're at the level of absurdity where you start to laugh, but it's not a joke.
It's not a joke. Like, look at history, and we are watching it happen.
Yeah.
This is why, like, I feel like people are just still sitting around going, oh, you know, my job and my family. It's like, I get it, but 10 years from now, that's going to be gone.
Right. They're coming for that anyway.
Yeah.
Like the time we're at the point now where it's going to start being, and it already is, purity testing, where they're going to be coming around making sure
we're
that
not coming to the point. We're there.
Yeah, we're there. Yeah, absolutely. Where it's going to be, hey, that family of yours, it's a nice family you got. That house of yours, it looks really, really nice. That job, looks comfortable. So what do you think about Black Lives Matter?
They're already doing that because they're already threatening family members of the people that they're pressuring. And when you see like a woman whose stepson is a cop who had an incident and is now under investigation, the woman loses her job. Not, you know, like that stuff that's not the only story of that happening either. I'm seeing that happen with other family members, and people associated are being canceled. Or if you just say, I don't know the answer. I mean, I haven't really looked into it, or canceled.
Yep.
Lose your job.
Silence is violence. Silence is violence.
You know, especially if you're in Hollywood or you're an influencer, you have to make a statement and you have to come out on the right side, or you're canceled.
My wife's sister, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna. She owns a dance studio. She's had parents, or at least one parent, ask her why she hasn't put out a statement on Black Lives Matter. And basically the implicit threat being, we might take our daughter out of your studio if you don't speak out.
Right. She should put a sign in her window that says Black-owned business. Then she's covered. Or Muslim-owned business, maybe. I think Muslim is still cachet. We can still use that as a intersectional point.
There's no escaping it. So what my point is that
that is intimidation of small business.
That's right.
To get on the bandwagon, and all this corporate money is pouring into these activist groups that are doing that kind of intimidation.
You know what you should do? Like, if that was me, I would kick that kid out of my studio. I'd be like, you don't get to do business with me anymore.
Yeah.
And then I would
go
online.
Me. Goodbye.
Yeah. And then I would go online and I would say, this is what happens when you come to me and tell me I need to take your political position. We won't.
That's right. Like, go on the offensive. Yeah. Don't let them go online.
If you want to have your kid in a studio where we're going to be truly welcome and inclusive and just dance and have fun, come be with us. You get a boon. People will be coming in by the dozen.
Right. No rage culture here. We're going to just be about dancing. Right. And part of that is like going on the offensive. Go on the offensive online, put out your statements. Don't let them control the narrative about your dance studio or whatever. Like, go put that in your Yelp, you know? Right. Anyway, and who cares if it's hard when you have brick and mortar, and it depends on what city you're in, because you could get firebombed and nobody would defend you if you were in Seattle, you know?
Right.
So I understand that it's hard, but if you don't take a stand now, maybe you lose some stuff. Maybe you lose some values.
You're definitely going to lose them later.
You're definitely going to lose them later.
You're definitely going to lose them anyway.
And let's talk. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm in the middle of rereading Atlas Shrugged. And I'm at the point where, I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't read it. But there comes that point where you're making that calculation of, well, I don't want to lose what I have. And at some point you have to realize it's gone. It's already gone.
It's gone.
It's already gone. And to the extent that it looks like you still have it, it's a total illusion, and you're just feeding the beast that's trying to feed on you.
One of the great lessons of Atlas Shrugged is that the enemy is not on the same wavelength as you. They're not valuers. Right. And you're kind of like giving them this benefit of the doubt when you say, well, I can have a conversation, and if I qualify my statement, maybe they'll hear me, and maybe
Yes.
There are people who are actually like on a death premise. They're actually just on the destructive. That's Ayn Rand's terminology for that. And they're not, and anyway, read the book and you'll understand, I think, that more, because to me, that was I've always believed in good and evil. I've always been kind of into justice, and I've never doubted that it's real, partly because of my education and learning about Nazis and communists and racists. And, history teaches you that there are evil people who will just murder for the sake of it. And because it makes them feel powerful. And when I watch people being made to kneel and wash feet of people, and people saying such hateful things and being really angry at white people for being white, I know that person's capable of murdering a white person because they're white. You can see it in a lot of these people's eyes and in their statements. And, when you watch some of this footage of the riots and I don't even want to call them protests, but even the people that aren't committing crimes, but they're just in that environment, the things they're saying. So anyway, I want to segue into this, what's going on at the city councils, because I think that's also, this goes right into what we're talking about. So all of these groups have all of this money, and a lot of it is Soros money. Black Lives Matters was funded by George Soros. Before all of this mayhem, and now they have Amazon money. And there are all these fringe, this is how they do it. They create these little, organizations with these fancy names, and they're all under certain umbrellas we've all heard of, but they have this new name and they fan out into society, and then they try to actually affect local change. And a few weeks ago, I was reading a PJ Media article that was talking about how city councils and school boards are under attack by this a laundry list of little activist organizations that are funded by these larger organizations like BLM and like Open Society and those groups. And they are fanning out and trying to get people kicked off councils and kicked off school boards that are conservatives or even just libertarians. Yeah. If you're not hardcore left, supportive of reparations and basically BLM's entire agenda, as well as the Green New Deal shit, they're going to try to get you kicked off for some problematic statement or, whatever. They're going to try to morally pressure the other people on the board or on the councils to do things that they want them to do, to enact their agenda and to get rid of people who are opposed to it. And they're showing up to these things unopposed because most of us don't go to these meetings. We live in society and we just don't go. We elect people and we think they're doing our business, and I don't have time for that. Right. But we have to actually take this seriously. And I'm just going to read so this article on PJ Media, and I'll put a link in the description. Beware, the woke mob is targeting you next, small town America. And that's by Jeff Reynolds. On June 24th, he wrote this. And then next thing I know, God, just the other day, out comes a USA Today article that in Asheville, North Carolina, the Asheville City Council has voted for reparations. They have explicitly voted for white people to be a lower class than blacks. And I know this is already going on with affirmative action. And I'd say blacks, but also brown and just everybody, every other, group except whites. Whites are now officially legally low. And the same thing happened in California with them unanimously repealing the constitutional amendment that says that you can't discriminate against race. And they're doing it to discriminate against white people so that they can institutionalize white people being second-class citizens.
So that they can have a new Jim Crow.
Yes, against white people. And we're already seeing the situation where if black people commit a crime, they're safe. If white people, like in St. Louis is a perfect example. You can break the gate, you can trespass, you can do whatever you want as long as you're black or BLM supported. If you do your constitutional right to defend yourself by just standing there with your gun and say, don't come into my house, you're going to be under investigation. You're the one that the DA is going to go after. And again, this sounds like I'm crazy. That DA was put into that office by George Soros. Because
that's right.
A few years ago, and I remember this, and I remember going, oh shit, what's his plan? What's he doing? he was funding all these district attorney and attorney general races in all of these states and local communities. And that's how we got Keith Ellison as a district attorney of Minnesota. One of the most immoral men that I've ever seen in politics. Is
also openly racist.
Openly racist against whites and Jews.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's apologized for his anti-Semitism yet. Maybe he will. But, you know, the guy's a creep. He was a terrible representative. He's gross. I mean, just everything about him is gross. And he's just a party lackey and a hardcore leftist. So he just does what people tell him. So he's George Soros's guy. I mean, that's not nuts. George Soros 100% funds groups like Open Society, which then 100% fund these little groups and give $100,000 to somebody like Keith Ellison to win his election, as well as pay for advertising and things like that. So that happened in Asheville. And now they're voting for reparations. This is happening in your community too, everybody's communities. And you're on a city council of which town?
Albertville in Minnesota.
And have you seen any of this? I'm sure you've seen equity. The equity.
I've seen equity with our school district, and it's something that I've tried to push back against. I have not seen any of this on our city council as of yet.
You're in a pretty conservative area, right? Of Minnesota?
Yes, but what I keep telling people around here is don't take any comfort in that at all, because the left has their eyes. It's like the eye of Sauron. They have their eye.
It's like that.
Absolutely. They have their eye on our little hamlet.
It's exhausting, man. If we don't start winning some battles, it's exhausting. But I don't think we've really fought yet. I don't think we're in the fight.
No, we're not. We're not in the fight at all. But here's the thing. Here's the ray of hope, and it's a sliver of a ray. Why are they investing all of this money and time to go after city councils and county boards and school board? Why do that? The answer is because that's where the threat to their plan is. There's this thing called the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, and it's the idea, it's the fundamental idea underlying the separation of powers and the levels of government, that if your federal government gets tyrannical, as a local municipality or as a state, you have the ultimate veto power against that. Just ignore them. Just don't agree with it. Don't do it. Don't comply. Tell them to go pound sand.
Right.
But you only have the capacity to do that if the people who you have elected to those lower offices have the conviction or wherewithal to follow through and say no. You know, I put forward a resolution here in Albertville a couple of months back in opposition to Governor Tim Walz's executive edicts, executive orders that he's put out regarding lockdowns. And the order, like, it was a take no prisoners resolution. You know, a lot of other cities around here passed resolutions that were basically like hat in hand, pretty please, Governor, will you change your mind? And my resolution was, yeah, that's not happening here. Sorry. We're not going to enforce it. And you don't have a police force. So ain't happening. That was, I mean, you know, legally, it was dressed up in legal speak, but that was the effect of it.
I get
right?
it. Yeah. It wasn't apologetic or qualified.
And it didn't grant him the presumption of authority to do what he did in the first place.
Yeah.
To me, that's the whole point. The whole point is you tell them you don't get to do this because you don't own us. Nobody voted you to be king. They voted you to be governor, and that's a very specific thing. So at any rate, I tell that story because I couldn't get a second on the motion. All right. You talked about this being a conservative area. Relatively speaking, it is. This is one of the most conservative areas in the state of Minnesota. I couldn't get a second for that motion. Why? Because people were afraid of political retribution. And this was openly stated. You can go back and watch the video of our city council meeting. They were afraid of retribution from the governor's office and from the state. They were afraid of not being able to get funds when they're doing their legislative sausage making and doling out slop at the trough for cash for things like roads and infrastructure programs. They're afraid of being put to the bottom of the list because we had the audacity to put forward a resolution saying, yeah, we're free here in Albertville. And that's why they didn't want to join on to it. That is weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That is unconscionable.
It's so immoral. It's
right.
just, and people have to start demanding that those people get tougher.
It's also mainstream.
It's
also mainstream.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that that's the status quo, right? One of the most conservative municipalities in the state of Minnesota can't get a second on that type of resolution. And yet, even in that environment, the Soros crew, it has their eye of Sauron gazing right at your city council, because that's how afraid they are that people like me will pass those resolutions.
That's right. And if they came around to your town and targeted you now, and eventually they will, it's you they would be trying to get rid of with intimidation, harassment, threatening your family, trying to dig up a tweet that your wife made.
Oh, they won't. They'll just look at mine. Mine are right there.
I know, but like, let's say you're not the guy you are. I mean, like you and I met at the Tea Party, right? Years ago. Maybe you're just a city council member and you're not as much of an activist as you have been in the past. And you've also had a prominent radio show in Minneapolis. So, there are plenty of people like you. And that actually the Asheville story is no, I'm sorry. In the PJ Media article, there's a story of a guy on a school board who's just like a regular guy.
Yeah.
And they found a tweet or something that his wife made. I mean, it's like literal family intimidation. And you got to read this article. I'm definitely going to put the link in the description because everyone needs to read this to see. He gives 3 examples. I think 2 from a city council, 1 from a school board. They're really icky. And then these leftists pat themselves on the back. Hey, I'm so great. Like I just threatened this guy's family and I got this guy fired off the school board. And now we can pass our equity agenda and our 1619 project and all of the stuff they want to indoctrinate your kids with. So that over and over, what comes up in these articles is that people say, and they were the only ones there. The leftists are the only ones there. What if 5 residents show up, Walter? What if they had showed up to that city council meeting and said, you will pass it like this. This is what we want. How would that have changed your colleagues' votes? Given them a little bit of moral courage, maybe?
Well, perhaps. I mean, we did have people who were present. It was a virtual meeting in the midst of COVID, so it was all on Zoom. It might have been different if it was in person. Who knows? But we did have people who were there who were supportive and who spoke in unapologetic terms in favor of the resolution. We also had people there on the other side of it who, are the ones who are all scared about the virus and think that Governor Walz is their savior, and it's incredibly irresponsible to suggest that people ought to be able to make their own judgments and live their own lives. That contingent was there as well. But to your point, the reason why the leftists are always there, or the only ones there. I've been doing this. I served a 4-year term, and now I'm in the middle of finishing out another one that I was appointed to for. It'll be less than 1 year. And in all of that time, I have rarely, if ever, seen anybody in the audience who wasn't a journalist from a local paper and who didn't have an item of business on the agenda. Like they have an application that they're looking to get approved or whatever the case may be. Like people aren't interested in what's going on at their city council or their school board or their county board. And I don't fault them for that because they have lives. I have a life. I don't want to be.
That's why you elect a person to go and sort of deal with the business of the city, and you don't have to think about it. But
the problem is,
yeah,
we're electing people of such flimsy moral conviction,
right?
That the moment 5 people walk in passionate about something, it's like, I just got to do whatever they want. I have to go with the crowd.
Perhaps if you're going against the mainstream, like we are talking about here, you have to have more than 5 people. Maybe you need 100 or you need a petition with 1,000 signatures on it before you show up. I don't know. And then I think as we're electing people, as these people run, we have to ask them the tough questions. Well,
Yes.
what do you think about this? And what would you say if this happened? What are you going to do when the leftists show up and try to do this? Right. You know, I remember I was on the radio in Minneapolis, and Tom Emmer, the former representative, used to be a co-host, and I was on his show with Bob Davis up there. And this was before he ran for office for representative. And he was telling me his greatest achievement, like what he was most proud of when he was in the state legislature of Minnesota, was making across the aisle deals. And
like compromise.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then when he ran for office, I was like, I wouldn't vote for him. That dude, I mean, you know, back 20 years ago, maybe Minnesota Democrats weren't quite so evil, but I still wouldn't vote for it. Like, what do you stand for? You know, like,
right.
I don't know. Like, my biggest achievement, I wouldn't say that was making a deal with my opposition. I would say that was slamming in something awesome that was right and good and true.
Right.
And that's a battle. That's something to win, not a compromise. And so,
Republicans really seem to be the only ones who put that forward as some sort of feather in their cap. I don't hear a lot of Democrats campaigning on how they compromise with
That's right. In fact, they do the opposite. They have to go super, I'll never compromise. And then once in office, make some compromises to get some stuff done. So yeah, we're not even in the battle. We're on total defense. And I've been saying show after show after show, two things: get involved locally and stop apologizing for being white.
Yeah.
And here I am, another show where I'm saying the exact same thing, but again, the news just keeps prompting me to say this. And so I'm going to keep hammering those messages, because I think that's it. Like, that's how we take back the culture and make sure that we're protected by law in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you talk about being on the defensive, the image that immediately came to mind was somebody huddled on the ground in the fetal position, covering their head with their hands. Like, it's defensive, but it's entirely passive. And it's just, please let this stop. That's the type of defensive that the right is right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an active defense. It's not where you're trying to look for opportunities.
We're not on our feet with our
we're not trying to establish a footing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that needs to change. And so what you're talking about, and I mean, it's almost to the point, like, why do you think they call it pride? Why do you think they have parades to celebrate pride about this, that, and the other thing? And then people talk about black pride and black power and on all of this. The narrative is that they've been oppressed, and so they need to actively go out and demonstrate their pride in order to counter the oppression that they're under. Now, the root of that is legitimate. In other words, when you're under attack, it's not good enough to just sit in the fetal position and cover your head. You have to get up and you have to actively defend yourself and go out and make your moral case that no, it's okay to live my life. It's okay to be who I am. And you don't get to say boo about it. Like, that's something you have to do. And we're at that point where, as you say, and again, it keeps sounding like a joke, but it's not.
Right.
White people, you have to stand up and have to start using that hashtag. It's okay to be white. You have to start talking about.
I have a T-shirt. I have that T-shirt, and I will wear it. It's okay to be white. Because F you, honestly. I mean, that's how I feel. And I maybe someone will hit me over the head. I don't know. It's happened before in my childhood. I got, part of this feels like a sandbox. Like, what are you going to do? Just cower and let these people rule society?
No, we have to fight back. We have to have an active defense, and we need to go on the offense.
Yeah.
And that's really the takeaway. Like, right now, that's pretty much the root of all of my activism and commentary right now is trying to shift people's mentality away from the reactionary, let's meme our way out of this, to know it's time for us to do our counter march through the institutions and clean house.
Well, thanks for coming on the show to talk about it. You are very passionate and motivating. And I mean, I hate to say this, but the color of your skin makes your voice really important. And also the color of my skin makes my ability to stand up and say, I'm not doing that. I mean, it's similar. White people who stand up and Black people who are standing, we're all really important because there's too much passivity. And on the right, I mean, our voices on the right are particularly important right now, I think.
I agree.
On that note, tell
me.
Awesome. Exactly. Dude, we've been on a party. I'm just going to put that out there. So tell us where people can find you.
So right now it's pretty intermittent, but I'm doing a live stream about once a week. You can find it on Facebook at the Closing Argument with Walter Hudson Facebook page.
The Closing Argument was your radio show in Minneapolis.
Right.
So now it's segued into a podcast that you're doing live stream. Okay.
Yes. And you can find me on Twitter at Walter Hudson and also on Parler at Walter Hudson.
You're on Parler. I haven't gotten on Parler. We'll see what happens. I'm waiting and seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to be there eventually. So.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It was really nice seeing you again. And we'll have you on again as these issues come up and other issues too.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sunny.
Right. Take care.
There is a house called the House of Sunny. It's filled with satire and fun. It's been the demise of bad ideas, and we'll know what's right when she's done. So download this free podcast now and give perspectives you may lack. It's concise and right and achieves world peace, guaranteed all your money back. Last time, ready?